Pour yourself a cold one.
They struck him, huh?
And listen to Ross Tucker break down the top college prospects on another tasty edition of The College Draft.
Yeah, it is Daddy Soda time here on the College Draft Podcast, presented, of course, by DraftKings Sportsbook. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman. Check me out, please, on social media at Ross Tucker NFL. Trying to grow the Twitter, the Facebook.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Need some more YouTube subscribers. You will love watching these shows on video, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. And then the podcast handle, of course, at Ross Tucker Pod. And we're talking about something today that I might actually know a little bit about. Offensive line play in the NFL. Finally, the glory position, the athletes, the best guys out there, the studs. And we'll also see what a running back like Emory has to say about them. At F-Ball Game Plan is how you find my guy, Emory Hunt, who's everywhere at all times. He's Football Game Plan on YouTube, footballgameplan.com/2022 draft guide. If you didn't get it, I don't know what you're doing. Listen, here's what I'll tell you about the draft guide. The first time I tried to download it, it was like, no, can't work. Like, it is a beast. It is, I mean, how many names? 1,000, Emory?
Over 1,000. I would say about 1,015, 1,010. The largest draft guide in draft guide history.
Think about that. The single largest draft guide in draft guide history, over 1,000 guys. That is absolutely awesome. Almost as awesome, Emory, as talking about offensive linemen. There's a lot to get into here. I should mention, by the way, that Mother's Day will be here before you know it. MyFrontPageStory.com. Just go to MyFrontPageStory.com. It is by far the best Mother's Day gift. It'll be here before you know it. You get a story written about your mom or your wife, if you want, whoever, any mother in your life, they will cry. When they see what you say about them with the quotes that you give the writer, they will cry. MyFrontPageStory.com. All right. A lot of talk, Emory, about who the best offensive tackle is in this draft. So let's get into it. In your mind, who is the best offensive tackle and why?
Ikem Ekwonu out of NC State. And again, we always joke about this, but this is how I think. When you see somebody's name get talked about a lot, or they get put first in mock drafts on draft Twitter, you automatically think like, all right, when I get to watch this guy's probably gonna be, whack. But when I finally got to watch him, I was like, all right, this dude legitimately vacates space. And it's almost like when you're watching those little those clips that people post from time to time on Twitter, where it's the oversized kid, in park ball and little league that's blocking this, this normal size 6-year-old, and this dude is the size of a 9th grader. That's what it looks like out there. He's in the ACC when he's out there running on the perimeter. He's legitimately exploding guys out of the area. So he is a tremendous blocker, and it was consistent on tape. So for me, he was someone that can do it well on both ends of offense as a run blocker and also as a pass protector. I know other guys have issues. Let's say in the run game. Let's say when you talk about a Charles Cross, right? People say, well, he doesn't have a lot of experience in the run game. But someone like Ekwonu has that experience on both sides, and he does it at an elite level. To me, he's the clear-cut OT1 in his class.
Any concern about his height, length at offensive tackle? You don't see a lot of offensive tackles 6'4" get drafted as high as we expect them to get drafted. Usually they're more 6'6", 6'7", 6'8". Are you concerned at all about the height?
Not overly concerned, because here's the thing. With the way folks talk about the offensive line and how, you have to invest in the offensive line, I totally agree with that. So even if I get him in the building and we say, hey, let's probably try him out at guard, as long as I have the talent in the building, I'm good because this dude can block his you know what off. And so whether it's at tackle, whether it's at guard, I want the talent in the building on my offensive line. He makes my offensive line better.
So here's my opinion on that. Give him a chance. I think at times we get too caught up in measurables and numbers. Like people forget, yeah, Joe Thomas was tall, but Joe Thomas has short arms. And it didn't seem to ever really bother him. I played with a guy that got a huge second contract. He still owes me a four-wheeler that he told me he was going to get me if he got a big second contract. Jonas Jennings was the left tackle in Buffalo. His contract year, I was the left guard next to him. He's 6'3". I mean, he's 6'3", and he played left tackle fine because he had really nice feet and he had terrific power. I mean, he was just country strong, as they used to say. Actually reminds me a little bit of Ekwonu. I think Ekwonu is better. Even Isaiah Wynn, was only 6'2 and a half, 6'3". Patriots drafted him in the first round, and it hasn't been his performance. It's been more the injuries. Just hasn't been able to stay healthy for the Patriots. My thoughts on him is I'd like to see him at tackle. I think he can get it done and play at a high level there. I think 6'4" is plenty tall enough. But if it doesn't go well, if the length is an issue, I think you slide him inside, and he's Zach Martin. He's Brandon Sheriff. I mean, he's a perennial Pro Bowl caliber offensive guard. It's hard to get away from Emory. He looks like a guard. I mean, his body type. He is a physical, powerful guy. Usually tackles a little bit longer, leaner. His body type looks more like an inside guy. I think he's smart enough and long enough with his arm length and has good enough feet to play tackle. But I think worst case scenario, you're talking about a guy that can become like a Pro Bowl guard, which, as there's more and more good interior rushers, is very valuable.
Yeah, and here's the thing too, man. When we look at these tackles, how well can they anchor? Because a lot of times when guys are struggling to reset their hands, is because they can't anchor, and a lot of times it's the short arms that tend to impede these guys from trying to reset and regain control of the rep. But he is fantastic with an anchor, so you're not going to bull rush him if you have longer arms. So he knows how to withstand that initial blow, and then he's able to redirect. So to your point, he knows how to play at 6'4". He knows how to play with his length. And that's something that people have to also take into account. It's like when we talk about the short player. Oh, well, he's the small running back. Oh, he's short, he's small. He's going to get swallowed. Like, man, he's been short and small his whole life. I think he knows how to avoid the catastrophic hits, So we have to give them credit for playing, especially at the Power 5 level, at his size and his length.
So obviously you have him ranked ahead of Evan Neal and Charles Cross. What did you think of Evan Neal from Alabama, Emory?
Neal is someone that's solid. I think, and this is a situation where first it was everyone talked about Evan Neal and just threw him out there. And I'll pull up one of the things that I have about Neal's game, like his balance can be a little bit off, So I think he tends to whiff on some blocks. You don't see that level of inconsistency in that regard from a Charles Cross or Ekwonu. And I'm speaking of Neal as my number 3 tackle with an 82 grade as opposed to 87. But when you talk about in regards to Charles Cross, he's 4 points behind Cross. So he's still a Pro Bowl type talent, but there are some inconsistencies within his game that I think people wanted to ignore because it's almost like you rubber stamp the prospect based off the uniform. Alabama offensive lineman, he's big, number 1. But then when you break him down, as we do in these processes, you tend to see where, okay, he has some areas to work on. But I will give him this. I was blown away that this dude measured in at 337 when I saw him at the combine because he is the leanest 337-pound tackle I have ever seen.
Yeah, he looks great. There's no question about that. By the way, I said this on the Ross Tucker football podcast a few weeks ago when I was checking out some of the offensive linemen. I was watching Charles Cross, and I'll get to Evan Neal in a little bit, but I was watching Charles Cross. I watched Mississippi State against Alabama. Emory, I couldn't even watch Charles Cross. Every play, Will Anderson was killing people, killing the right tackle. He was in the backfield every play. I've said it before. I'll say it again. It is criminal that kid is not allowed to be in this draft. He is unreal. You know, you do this all the time. You ranked over 1,000 players in your draft guide, which hopefully everybody watching or listening already has, footballgameplan.com/2022 draft guide. But you know what it's like, Emory, when you're trying to watch one guy and somebody else just keeps popping, like that is when you know that you got something special.
Yeah, and when you're watching, anybody on Alabama's defense, Anderson is the one that pops consistently. And I saw this happen a couple times with different teams. So let's say when I'm watching Georgia and I'm watching Nakobe Dean, but man, I can't get past Tyndall's, Channing Tyndall's explosiveness. Like, he's a lot faster, more explosive than Dean. And I'm supposed to be watching Dean, but I'm gonna get to Tyndall, but man. And also, like, I remember watching Max Mitchell, the offensive tackle for the University of Louisiana, the number one university in the state of Louisiana, one of the best football programs this year, state national champions in the state of Louisiana. But watching the linebacker for App State was like, yo, is something wrong with my film? Because I feel like he's running, 4 times faster than the speed. But that's just how explosive and how fast it is. I want to say it's DeMarco Jackson for App State, who's at the Senior Bowl. But I'm watching Max Mitchell block, but I keep noticing, Jackson on the other side. I'm like, my goodness, I can't wait to watch this dude. But you're right. Sometimes guys just kind of stand out. And you see that a lot in high school too, when a scout goes to scout one player, but his teammate steals the show and ends up usurping the guy that they came to watch and ended up offering him. So it happens a lot.
Yeah, I liked Evan Neal. Trying to remember, I think I watched him in the SEC championship game against Georgia. I liked Evan Neal. Extraordinary size and length and uses it well. He doesn't have like awesome feet. He's not Walter Jones or Chris Samuels or some of these guys with really awesome feet. He's got good feet, but I thought he did a nice job with his hands. And I thought and he's smart. When there were twists running, he knew what was coming. I thought his combo of size, hands, and good enough athleticism was really impressive. To me, he's sort of a safer pick than Ekwonu as a tackle. I'd be very surprised if Evan Neal isn't a solid starter for a long time. I guess the question is whether or not he becomes a Pro Bowler or whether or not he's sort of like a difference-making player. Like, I think Ekwonu has the physicality to actually be a difference-making player. The question is whether or not that ends up happening at tackle. What did you think? You obviously have Cross way ahead of Evan Neal, Emory.
Yeah, because again, we know it's a quote-unquote passing league, right? Guess who has the most reps in terms of pass pro? Charles freaking Cross, because of that offense they play at Mississippi State. So watching him just play the piano, like you talk about, pick up stunts and pass guys off, not, shocked by speed guys. He's able to get a wrangle on them. And a lot of the speed guys he faced, he actually handled them pretty well. And so I'm like, all right, so this guy can definitely do it. The run game is obviously something that he's going to have to get accustomed to. But let's say if you're a team that's specific on what you want, and it's not like he doesn't know how to run block. Let's just get that out the way. It's not like they don't practice running plays at Mississippi State or they don't run the football at Mississippi State. He just has more experience, practical experience in game in pass pro. And so that nuance, that savvy, and that ability is something that you just couldn't ignore. And I mean, just getting a lot of reps at it. That's why you're so good on YouTube, because you got so much reps at these videos. You know what I'm saying? And so it just naturally yields itself to being ready to step in and be on camera and be the next John Madden in terms of calling games. So when you look at Cross, the pass pro, ready to transition, step in right away. If I'm Cincinnati, that would be the guy that I would probably want to grab. And grant he's going to go top 5, so he's way out of Cincinnati's range. For someone like Cincinnati, Cross would be the one that I would want to step in right away and be that blindside protector.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about him. I was watching him against Alabama. I thought he had good feet. I guess I had heard everybody talking about how great of a pass blocker he was. I guess I was expecting a little bit more. And that's the thing that's tough about scouting is you're looking at him against certain competition. I think he's got good feet. I think he's got good length. I think he uses his hands pretty well. I was looking for a little bit more physicality, but then that's my bias, right? Like that's what I like in offensive linemen. Speaking of physicality, before we get to the inside guys, I did want to get your thoughts since I know you're always all over the small school guys, which I hate. I hate that term, by the way. I hate any of those terms. I don't even know what to say. The guys that are not Power 5, let's put it that way. Curious to get your thoughts on who you like better between Raymond and Penning. Bernard Raymond from Central Michigan and Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa.
I like Raymond a little bit better because he has the upside. He's still a neophyte in terms of playing a position. So you have some growth opportunities there. Penning is probably more ready to step in and play right now. But if you're drafting prospects, like we talked about Malik Willis, even though I feel like Ritter is ready to play right now, I'll take, Willis first because he is the prospect of the two. Raymond to me is the prospect of the two because he, still learning how to play tackle, transition from, tight end to playing tackle and look competent this season, even though his teammate is really good too. But also he played well down at the Senior Bowl, so he's growing in the right direction. So you still have some growth potential with him. So I would take him over Penning, although Penning I think is a really good prospect in his own right.
Let's get to the inside guys. And man, I was impressed by this guy. And it seems like he's crushed every part of the process. And he's your number one guard, Zion Johnson from Boston College.
Yeah, and one of the few in the draft class that I gave a 90 grade to, which is future all-pro type, right? Because I don't give those out often. You only have a few in a class. He's one of the few. And I'm talking about a handful, maybe like 5. And he's one of those guys because he was outstanding just watching him on film. And he could play any one of the 3 positions, tackle, guard, or center. I know he got some center work down at the Senior Bowl. But when you go back and watch the Missouri game, like every big run they had against Missouri came on the left side where he was just opening, doors for the running back and just vacating space. He's quick off the ball. He's technically sound. He's dynamic on both ends of offense. He's a smart football player. He, to me, I think he's the number 1 overall offensive lineman in the draft class.
That doesn't surprise me at all. It feels like he's been a prospect for years too. Was he a guy that people thought would come out last year? I feel like I've heard his name for a long time.
Yeah, they thought he was going to come out last year, but he ended up going back. I don't know why he didn't come out. I don't know if his initial draft grade was because I thought he was projected to go in the first round last year and decided to go back. And so, he's been on the radar for a while. Him and Lindstrom, the younger Lindstrom, that is also in his class as well as a center.
Any other inside guys or guards that you really like, whether it's Kennard from Kentucky or Kenyon Green from A&M? It felt like before the year, Kenyon Green was the guy getting all the love. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, and he's solid. He's my number 2 guard. I like him a lot, but I think Zach Tom is someone that I've been very impressed with after watching this film. Some people view him as a tackle. I see him as a guard. I like his footwork. I think his footwork is phenomenal. granted, because again, that's why people see him as a tackle because of his footwork. But I like him on the inside. This dude is smart, never fooled by stunts and twists up front, and that's huge because you're gonna see a lot of games, a lot of times at the NFL level. So he's a smart football player and has the feet to really match what he's gonna face in terms of the quickness on the interior. So I'm a big Zach Tom fan. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in round 1 too.
Wow. All right. What about at center? Let's get to Tyler Linderbaum. I mean, I think everybody has him as their top center. I'll say this, as a former offensive lineman, that guy is fun to watch. I mean, he is really, really fun to watch. He reminds me of all like sort of the old school athletic centers. Although it's really not even that old school. You know, he reminds me of Jason Kelsey. That's what he reminds me of.
Nice, smaller center, but dominates bigger guys. Feet never stop moving. He's always able to climb to the second level. He's athletic. So I think when you're athletic as a center, you're able to do more offensively. Your playbook is entirely open. You can get creative in the run game because your center is able to get out and around on pulls and traps and things of that nature and really help aid that process. And I think because he has that experience, it's almost like we talk about how I like sight unseen prospects. So Iowa offensive lineman, I'm all in. Utah D lineman and defensive backs, fine. So sign me up. You know what I mean? So San Diego State running backs, I'm all in. Defensive backs, perfect. So Iowa with Linderbaum, he's been consistent throughout the process, and he is the number 1 center. But I would also say watching film, I didn't expect Cole Strange out of Chattanooga to be right there nipping at his heels. I was blown away with how consistent he was on film and how he looked at the Senior Bowl.
Tell me more about him.
Well, you talk about someone that combine invite, Senior Bowl, performer, can play guard or center. Some even say he could play tackle. He's 6'5", so he's a taller center, but he's quick off the ball, great recognition skills, excellent player. And when you talk about playing in the SoCon, you're talking about one of the better point of attack leagues. I know people bring up the Missouri Valley Conference. I think that's more of a team thing. But when you're talking about point of attack, you're going to see quicker, interior defensive linemen. You're going to see guys that play really good at the point of attack. You talk about your Furmans, your Citadels, your VMIs. Those teams really hold their own up front. Western Carolina, but Strange is someone, he's functionally strong. He has good strength, and he showed at the Senior Bowl that he's able to step up in that level of competition and play well. And especially when you think Chattanooga, they played Kentucky this year. He really, excelled in that game. And I think that's the game that he would probably point to and say, hey, go check out the Kentucky tape against that defensive line with those interior defensive linemen and see how well I handle business.
Let's get to some of your sleepers, Emory. Nobody does it better than you do. Give me a sleeper offensive lineman.
David Kroll out of Delaware. And, it's funny, and we talk about the process a lot, Ross, when you're watching, how I watch positions, I'll grade one position all the way through. So it kind of trains your eye to once you see what an Evan Neal is, and then you see what the other prospects are, you kind of have a gauge on what works. And someone like David Kroll was eye-popping in how excellent he was. He probably one of the more technically sound offensive linemen in the class, and his technique was tremendous. Go watch the Rutgers game and how well he handled their defensive line was something that stood out to me. They ran all over Rutgers that day. They didn't get the upset, but their run game was tremendous. I thought Kroll did a really good job and someone that's going to be on a roster come training camp.
Any other sleepers?
I would say the 2 guards from North Carolina, Joshua Ezeudu and Marcus McKeithen. I was surprised at how good the offensive line was, contrary to popular belief from the outside media about Sam Howell's play. But those 2 guards really excelled. And when I was at the NFLPA game, like, these dudes can play. And then you go back and watch the film, and they checked off boxes, how athletic they are, how big they are. These some big dudes that can move, and they can also clear out space in the run game. So I thought both guards, Izudu and McKeithen, were really surprisingly talented, and they both are in my top 10 guards. It actually back to back on how I have them ranked, but they were, to me, some of the more underrated players that no one's talking about. UNC had a really good offensive line, in my opinion, based off how those dudes was blocking.
Just got to ask you, I'm curious what you think of the big boy from Minnesota.
I worry about the weight. If he can control that, not saying that, it was a problem at Minnesota, but you wonder, in the NFL, he dropped some weight. He got down to, I think, 387 for the combine. Is he going to trend in that direction, or is he going to hold steady at 387, or is he going to, creep back upwards toward 400? Because I think that can be a hindrance, because you're 400 plus pounds, and you're going against, let's say, a Von Miller. I know that's an extreme case, but Von Miller is what, 245, 250? Like, you got to be able to be quick out there. And granted, yeah, he was able to hold down some pass rushers, but we're talking about Big Ten pass rushers. We're not talking about SEC pass rushers or Pac-12 pass rushers. So I worry about the weight, and if he's going to continue to drop or hold steady or creep up forward. But he can play, but I know the weight has to be a bit of a concern.
Check him out on social media at FBall Game Plan on Twitter. He's Football Game Plan on YouTube. We are youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. The draft guide. It's time. You got a couple weeks before the draft. Make sure you get it now. Over 1,000, the biggest draft guide in the history of draft guides. Footballgameplan.com/2022 draft guide. Love getting the tweets to at Ross Tucker NFL or at Ross Tucker Pod or Emory at FBall Game Plan, with you guys showing your receipts for getting the draft guide. And if you get one, you can ask Emory any question you want here on the show. Just send it to me, Ross at RossTucker.com. You got a specific prospect? You don't even need to ask it, actually, now that I'm talking to myself right now, because it's already in the draft guide. So why would you ask a question if you bought the draft guide? Because he's got the answer to every guy in the draft guide. So my little giveaway right there I just came up with, spur of the moment, makes absolutely no sense. There can be no question because all of the questions are answered in said draft guide. So maybe you should ask your question and then buy the draft guide, because then you'll be in better shape. Anyway, I need to stop talking. He's Emory. I'm Ross. The keg is kicked. We're done.
Thanks for listening to the College Draft Podcast. Make sure to also subscribe to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Fantasy Feast, Even Money, and The Business of Sports. All available at Apple Podcasts, RossTucker.com, or wherever podcasts can be found.
A lot of times on the show, I mentioned DraftKings. Here's what you need to know. You got to be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER, or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. By the way, if what I was talking about included a deposit bonus, doesn't always, sometimes it does. Deposit bonus requires 25 times playthrough, and deposit bonuses are paid out in site credit.